He stood in the same corner of the mall every day, 67 years old, quiet, humble. Most people never even noticed him until that night when the three thieves broke into the mall and the young security guard froze in terror. The old man slowly stood up, rolled up his sleeve, and that's when everyone realized who he really was. Welcome to Hidden Heroes. Before we tell this powerful story of courage, respect, and forgotten valor, tell me in the comments what city you're watching from today. And if you believe stories like this need to be heard, hit that subscribe button and help us keep these stories alive. The shift change at Northridge Mall happened at 6 p.m. every day, like clockwork, day shift out, night shift in. Part of that routine was the old man who sat on the small chair in the corner. Robert Martinez, 67 years old, gray hair, slightly stooped shoulders, never drew any attention to himself. His uniform was a little too big for him. Navy blue shirt, black pants, radio on his shoulder. His shoes were old but clean. His walk was slow, his steps measured. Most of the time he had a coffee cup in his hand, sitting quietly, watching people pass by. The young security guards called him Bob and greeted him respectfully. But behind his back, they'd smile. Poor guy, past retirement age and still working. They'd say, what can he do in that condition anyway? Just sits there watching. Bob never said anything. He'd quietly sip his coffee and continue doing his job. Sometimes, little kids would approach him and ask, Mister, are you a police officer? He'd smile and say, No, kiddo. I just keep an eye on things around here. Assistant Security Manager Mike Johnson would often use Bob as an example in staff meetings. Be like Bob here. Quiet, humble, dedicated to the job. But even when he said this, there was a slight hint of condescension in his voice, as if he was thinking, what can he really do at his age? On Bob's desk was just one photograph, black and white, old, with a scratched frame. In the photo was a young soldier, looking proudly at the camera. No one realized that the soldier in that photo was Bob, because there seemed to be such a huge difference between that young soldier and this old security guard, or so they thought. Every morning at 6 a.m., Bob would go home. He lived alone in a small, single-story house. His wife had passed away 3 years ago. His children lived out of state, calling once a month. Dad, you should stop working and come live with us, they'd say. But Bob would respond, I'm fine like this. I'm used to it, and change the subject. There were no medals on his walls at home, no military photographs, just family photos and a few landscape paintings, as if he had completely erased his past or wanted it to appear that way. But at night, when no one was around, he'd pull out an old box and look at the papers inside. Old documents, faded photographs, a few letters. He never showed these to anyone. Even his children didn't know about this box. Things at the mall were usually very quiet. The biggest incidents were occasionally lost children or parking lot arguments. Bob would handle these situations quietly. He never needed to raise his voice. He would speak in a calm voice and settle people down. The young security guards would sometimes wonder, Bob, have you ever experienced anything exciting here? They'd ask. He'd respond, Excitement is for young folks, son. We prefer things calm, and smile as he walked away. But sometimes something would glimmer in Bob's eyes, especially when faced with dangerous situations, as if the old reflexes inside him would wake up, then go back to sleep. No one noticed this, of course. That evening, everything started normally. It was a cold March evening. The mall was slowly emptying. The last customers were leaving. Stores were pulling down their shutters. Bob was in his usual spot, on his corner chair. There were 3 people on the night shift: Bob, 25-year-old Jake, and Tyler, a 22-year-old who had just started working. Jake had been working for 2 years and felt experienced. Tyler had only been on the job for a week, still trying to learn everything. Bob, you sit in that corner. We'll go on rounds, said Jake. If anything happens, let us know on the radio. Bob just nodded. This is how things continued anyway. They did active duty. He provided support with his experience. At 10:30 p.m., the mall was completely empty. The cleaning crew had also finished their work and left. Only 3 security guards remained in the massive building. And of course, the security cameras. As Bob sipped his coffee, he was keeping track of the monitors out of the corner of his eye. It had become a habit. He knew every corner, every corridor. The slightest abnormal situation wouldn't escape his notice. At 11:45 p.m., the first sign came: a shadow on the camera near the back entrance. Very brief, almost unnoticeable. Bob frowned and focused on that camera. A minute later, again, this time clearer. Someone was there. He picked up his radio. Jake, Tyler, check the back entrance. Suspicious movement. His voice was calm, but determined. The young guards were a bit surprised. Bob didn't usually speak so decisively. There were 3 of them. They looked professional. Black clothes, gloves, masks. They had managed to get past the electronic lock at the back entrance. As Bob watched them on the monitor, old memories flashed through his mind. He had faced such situations before, but back then he wore a different uniform. Jake, be careful, he warned over the radio. 3 people. They look organized. But the young guards were inexperienced. Tyler was scared. His hands were shaking. Jake was taking the situation lightly. Bob, don't exaggerate. It's probably just some drunk guy leaning against the door. Bob took a deep breath. He knew the young men were going to make a mistake. But should he intervene? For 15 years he had played this role. Old, slow, harmless security guard. No one expected anything else from him. The thieves had gotten inside now. He was tracking them on the monitor. They were heading toward the electronics store. Their plan was obvious. They would take the phones and tablets and get out quickly. Jake and Tyler were at the other end of the corridor. They hadn't seen the thieves yet. Bob picked up the radio. First floor, near Best Buy, 3 people. Approach carefully. But that's when everything went wrong. Tyler excitedly spoke too loudly. I see them. His voice echoed through the corridor. The thieves realized they'd been caught. Everything happened very quickly. The thieves panicked. Instead of running, they went on the attack. One of them attacked Tyler. The young man fell to the ground and hit his head. Jake ran to help, but the other thief attacked him too. Bob was watching what was happening on the monitor. His heart was breaking. The young men were in danger, but if he intervened, his identity might be exposed. 15 years of secrecy could be broken. Jake's desperate voice came over the radio. Bob, help! Tyler's hurt. I can't handle them alone. At that moment, the old soldier inside Bob awakened. He slowly stood up. The coffee cup he had left on the chair was still warm, but the look in his eyes had changed. He was no longer a tired 67-year-old man. He rolled up his sleeve. The tattoo he had hidden for so long appeared, faded, but still recognizable, a green arrowhead piercing through wings, and below it, in small letters, De oppresso liber, to free the oppressed, U.S. Army Special Forces, the Green Berets, one of America's most elite units, and Bob was one of that unit's former commanders. Bob started walking, but this was no longer an old man's walk. His steps were decisive, his posture straight, his eyes target focused. When he retired 15 years ago, he thought he had lost these reflexes. But muscle memory never dies. He didn't run down the corridor. There was no need to run, because he knew what to do. First, he assessed the situation. 3 thieves, 2 wrestling with the young men, 1 watching for an escape route. Not all of them were armed. They just had clubs. He quietly approached the first target. The thief, attacking Tyler, never noticed the old security guard until Bob's hand touched his shoulder. With a professional move, he neutralized the man. No sound was made. The second thief was wrestling with Jake. When he saw Bob, he laughed. "Old man, go sit in your corner. You'll get hurt here." Bob didn't answer. He just approached. The thief attacked with a club, but Bob caught the club in midair, twisted it, and 3 seconds later, the thief was on the ground, unconscious. The third thief couldn't understand what had happened. How could this old man move so fast? He decided to run, but Bob caught him too. He pressed him against the wall and said in a calm but determined voice, "Don't move. You're staying here until the police arrive." The police arrived 10 minutes later. Paramedics treated Tyler. He didn't have any serious injuries. Jake was in shock. He couldn't understand what had happened. "Bob, how did you... those moves?" Bob had lowered his sleeve. The tattoo was no longer visible. "Old habits," he said simply. "I had some training a long time ago." The police officer took statements. Name? Robert Martinez. Occupation? Security guard. "Have you encountered situations like this before?" Bob paused for a moment. "A long time ago? Yes." The police officer frowned. This old man's movements reminded him of someone professional. But he didn't ask further. Jake was still shocked. "Bob, who are you really?" Bob smiled. "I'm just Bob, son. Your old Bob." The next day, the mall manager, Mike Johnson, came. He had heard about the incident. He called Bob to his office. "Bob, I learned about last night's incident." "Thank you very much. But I'm curious, how do you know those moves?" Bob remained silent. "Look, I'm not going to say anything bad to you. I'm just curious. Are you a former soldier?" Bob looked out the window. A long silence. Then, "Yes." "Which unit?" "U.S. Army Special Forces." Mike Johnson's eyes widened. The Green Berets were known by everyone. The most elite unit that undertook the most dangerous missions. From when to when? 1967 to 1992. 25 years. Your rank? "I was a master sergeant when I retired." Mike Johnson couldn't speak from shock. Sitting across from him wasn't an ordinary security guard, but a retired commander from one of America's most elite units. Why did you never say anything?" Bob shrugged. "The past stays in the past. Now I'm just Bob." The news spread slowly. First the security guards learned, then the mall staff, then some customers. But Bob never changed. He continued to sit in the same corner, on the same chair. Only behaviors changed. Jake and Tyler now looked at him differently, listening carefully to every word he said. When they said Bob, there was real respect in their voices. Some young security guards asked him questions, seeking advice. Bob gave short answers, not giving too many details. Bob, weren't you scared that night? Fear is natural, son. What's important is being able to manage fear. How could you move so fast? The body develops habits. They never disappear. How many operations did you participate in? He never answered this question. He just smiled and changed the subject. Chapter 10. Old Friends. A month later, while Bob was on his usual shift, two men came to the mall. Middle-aged, serious, disciplined posture. As soon as they saw Bob, they stopped. Sergeant, is that you? Bob looked up. He recognized them. They were from his old unit. Now they were retired, but still had that military bearing. Williams, Davis, how are you? We heard you were working here. We couldn't believe it. Our sergeant working as a security guard here. Bob raised his hand. Those days are over, boys. I'm just Bob now. But Sarge, you were our hero. Those operations, those successes. The past stays in the past. Now I'm here, doing this job, and I'm happy. The old soldiers were sad, but understanding. As they said goodbye, William said, Sarge, we'll always respect you, no matter what job you do. Days passed. Bob's identity was no longer secret, but he still maintained the same humble attitude. He had become like a school for the young security guards. Jake asked one day, Bob, why don't you ever brag? You're a heroic person. Everyone should know you. Bob answered while sipping his coffee. Son, real heroes don't brag. Those who brag aren't heroes. But we want to hear your stories. Some stories aren't told. They're lived. You're writing your own story now. These words greatly affected Jake. From that day on, he approached his job more seriously. Taking Bob as an example, Tyler had also changed. He had been scared that night, but felt safe with Bob's courage. Now, he too was learning to be more confident, to notice danger beforehand. One evening, during shift change, mall manager Mike Johnson came. He wanted to talk to Bob. Bob, I want to promote you. Would you become head of security? Bob shook his head. Thank you, but it's not necessary. I'm happy here, in this position. But you, your experience, your knowledge, it's going to waste. Nothing goes to waste. Everything I teach these young friends here, tomorrow, they'll teach to others. It will continue like this. Mike Johnson understood. Bob wasn't just a security guard. He was a teacher. Quietly, humbly, he was training the young generation. Weeks turned into months. Bob's influence on the mall went beyond just security. Young employees from various stores would sometimes approach him during their breaks, seeking life advice. A teenage cashier from the clothing store once asked, Mr. Bob, how do you stay so calm when people are rude to you? Bob paused from organizing some paperwork. Well, kiddo, I learned long ago that other people's anger says more about them than it does about you. You can't control what they do, but you can control how you respond. The teen nodded thoughtfully. Were you always this wise? Bob chuckled. Wisdom comes from making mistakes and learning from them. I've made plenty of both. Even some of the store managers began consulting Bob on security matters. His quiet competence had earned him a reputation that spread throughout the mall community. One particularly busy Saturday evening, a situation arose that would test everything Bob had been teaching. A group of rowdy teenagers had been causing problems throughout the mall, knocking over displays, harassing customers, and being generally disruptive. Jake and Tyler were handling it, but the situation was escalating. The teenagers were getting more aggressive, and other customers were becoming frightened. Bob, Jake called over the radio. We might need backup. These kids are getting out of hand. Bob was already walking toward the commotion before Jake finished speaking, but instead of approaching with authority or aggression, he walked slowly, calmly, his hands visible and non threatening. Gentlemen, he said quietly to the group of teenagers, I'm wondering if we might have a conversation. The leader of the group, a tall kid with an attitude, turned around. Who are you, old man? Mall cop gonna arrest us? Bob smiled slightly. I'm just Bob. And no, I'm not going to arrest anyone. I was just thinking, you all look like you've got some energy that needs an outlet. Am I right? The unexpected approach caught the teenagers off guard. They had been ready for confrontation, not conversation. What's it to you? Another kid asked, but with less hostility. Well, Bob continued, when I was about your age, I had a lot of energy too. Problem was, I didn't know what to do with it. Made some poor choices. Took me a while to figure out that energy could be used for something good. He paused, looking at each of them. Any of you play sports? Work out? Have jobs? The conversation that followed lasted 20 minutes. By the end, the teenagers were not only calmed down, but actually helping to clean up the mess they had made. Two of them asked Bob about job opportunities at the mall. Jake and Tyler watched in amazement. How did you do that? Tyler asked later. Sometimes, Bob said, people just need someone to see them as people, not problems. As Bob's second year at the mall progressed, something remarkable had happened. The security team had become one of the most respected in the city. Other malls began asking for advice on training their staff. Jake had been promoted to shift supervisor and was applying Bob's methods of de-escalation and community building. Tyler had gained confidence and was considering a career in law enforcement, inspired by Bob's example of service. Bob, Jake said one evening, I've been thinking about what you said about writing our own stories. I think I understand now. It's not about the big dramatic moments, is it? It's about how we show up every day. Bob nodded approvingly. You're learning, son. Real character is built in the small moments when no one's watching. 2 years after the break-in incident, Bob was still in his corner chair, still sipping his coffee, still watching over his small part of the world. But now he wasn't invisible. People knew who he was, what he represented. A new young security guard had started. Marcus, 19 years old, fresh out of high school, nervous about his first real job. Mr. Bob? Marcus approached hesitantly. Jake told me I should introduce myself. I'm the new guy. Bob stood up and extended his hand. Welcome to the team, Marcus. First job. Yes, sir. I'm pretty nervous, to be honest. Bob smiled. That's good. Being nervous means you care. Jake and Tyler will show you the ropes. But remember, this job isn't just about security. It's about making people feel safe. There's a difference. As the weeks passed, Bob began mentoring Marcus the same way he had mentored Jake and Tyler. The cycle continued. What Bob couldn't have known was how far his influence had spread. Jake had started a security training program at the local community college, incorporating the principles Bob had taught him. Tyler had joined the police academy and was already known for his calm, respectful approach to conflict resolution. Several of the young people Bob had guided over the years had gone on to military service, law enforcement, or other forms of public service. They carried with them the lessons of quiet competence, humble service, and treating everyone with dignity. The mall itself had become known as one of the safest, most welcoming shopping centers in the region. Customer satisfaction was up, incidents were down, and employee morale was higher than it had ever been. One day, Mike Johnson approached Bob with a newspaper clipping. Bob, you need to see this. The article was titled The Quiet Hero of Northridge Mall and detailed Bob's impact on the community. It mentioned his military service, the break in incident, and the transformation of the mall's security culture. They want to do a feature story on you, Mike said. Television interview, the works. Bob shook his head immediately. No, thank you. But Bob, this could inspire people. Your story could make a difference. My story is already making a difference, Bob replied quietly. Right here, with these young people I work with every day. That's enough for me. Mike Johnson realized he shouldn't have been surprised. This was exactly what he should have expected from Bob Martinez. One quiet Tuesday evening, when the mall was nearly empty, Marcus worked up the courage to ask Bob something that had been on his mind. Mr. Bob, can I ask you something personal? Of course, son. Why do you work here? I mean, with your background, you could probably do anything. Why this job? Bob was quiet for a long moment, looking out at the nearly empty mall corridor. Marcus, I spent 25 years of my life in the military. I went places most people will never go, saw things most people will never see. I was proud of my service, but when I came home, he paused. When I came home, I realized that all those big missions, all that training, all that experience, it was all preparation for this. For what? For being here when Jake and Tyler needed someone. For being here when you needed guidance. For being here when those kids needed someone to see them as more than troublemakers. Bob smiled. Turns out, protecting a mall isn't so different from protecting anything else. It's about caring for the people around you. Marcus nodded, beginning to understand. The uniform doesn't make the mission important, son. The mission makes the uniform important. And taking care of people, that's always an important mission. Bob Martinez still sits in that corner chair, still 67 years old, still quiet, still humble. Many people still don't notice him, but those who do know, they're in the presence of something special. For 25 years, he served his country in faraway places. Now he serves his community in a shopping mall in suburban America. To him, there's no difference in importance. Service is service. He never talks about the medals he earned. He never mentions the commendations in his military file. He never speaks of the operations that remain classified to this day. Instead, he talks about Jake's promotion, Tyler's acceptance to the police academy, Marcus's growing confidence. Because Bob Martinez understands something that many people miss. Heroes aren't always the ones making headlines. Sometimes they're the ones making sure the headlines never need to be written. That night when three thieves broke into the mall, everyone realized who Bob really was. But the truth is, he had always been the same person. The only thing that changed was that people finally started to see. Bob Martinez's story teaches us that real heroes are always among us. Sometimes we don't notice them because they prefer to hide behind ordinariness. But when danger strikes, when people need help, they step forward and then they quietly return to their corners. Because for them, heroism isn't a performance, it's a way of life. Have you ever met someone like Bob Martinez? Someone who seemed ordinary but had an extraordinary past? Someone who served quietly without asking for recognition? Tell us about them in the comments and let us know what city you're watching from. Here at Hidden Heroes, we'll continue to share stories like these because real heroes' stories deserve to be heard, they deserve to be remembered, and they deserve our respect. Don't forget to subscribe. We're here every week with new stories of quiet courage and humble service because some people do great things in silence, and it's our job to make sure their voices are heard. Until the next story. And remember, that ordinary looking person passing by you might just be the greatest hero of all.